Chapter 2. Negotiations.
They sat quietly at the table. Mander Zuma, Reen, Irana, and the Bothan. The three had headed away from the sirens, and after half an hour they found themselves at a Swokes tap caf that specialized in outlander cuisine, or at least the Swokes' best guess of it. The establishment was missing the traditional trench down the center of the room, but the tables were still massive and, Mander noted, bolted to the floor. They sat across from one another, the clear envelope with the crystals between them. Reen, Irana, stared at it like it was a live snake, fascinated and horrified. Her Bothan companion, who had not spoken a word during their fight or their later flight, was looking around the tap caf. He looked like an impatient, easily distracted puppy, but Mander realized that he was checking out all the exits and making sure that they had not been followed.
"This is what killed my brother,"
she said at last. She sounded defeated.
"Likely,"
said Mander.
"There were strange crystals at the corners of your brother's eyes, as well as in his blood."
She ran her hand through her dark blue hair. In a soft voice, she said,
"His blood. How was the rest of him? What did you discover when you examined his body?"
Mander was surprised by her directness.
"I don't know if you would really be comfortable knowing the details."
"Tell me,"
she snapped, and several heads in the tap caf turned their way. The Bothan looked at her and frowned. She nodded agreement, then said more quietly,
"What else did you find in the body?"
"Purplish crystals at the corners of the eyes and mouth,"
Mander said quickly.
"Darkening and expansion of the veins and arteries, in addition to the damage from such a fall. And there was a surprising rigidity in the muscles. He was angry when he died."
The Pantoran slumped in her seat and bowed her head. Mander looked at the now concerned face of the Bothan and back at the Pantoran.
"I committed the body to the flames, as is the custom of our order. Had I known you were in the area, I would have waited."
There was no response. Mander tapped the envelope and said,
"It is definitely a spice. It dissolves easily and could be put into the scent wine the Rodian brought him. I think that is how the poison was administered."
Reen Irana's shoulders shook, and at first Mander thought she was sobbing. Instead, he realized that it was a sharp, mocking laugh.
"Poison?"
she said, and her jaw stiffened.
"If only it was simply that."
At once, Mander realized that he had been mistaken. Reen Irana knew something more than he. What had he missed? He decided to wait for the Pantoran to tell him, and the silence grew between them. When she finally spoke, she fought to control her words.
"Are you Jedi or this naive? This isn't just a poison, this is a narcotic. A hard version of spice, it's called Tempest."
Mander looked at the packet. Now he regarded it like a serpent as well. Reen leaned forward and continued.
"Spacers have been seeing this spice throughout the Spiral Arms, along the Polemian trade route and Hydian Way, even in the corporate sector and Hutt Space. It's used either mixed in drinks or as an aerosol. It's a spice, but a nasty one, addictive and destructive. Heavy users are marked by a darkening of the blood vessels. You can see them through the flesh. They also..."
She paused for a moment, thinking of her brother before continuing.
"Addicts are also prone to fits of uncontrollable rage."
"Like that which Toro showed in the restaurant,"
Mander said quietly.
"It still could have been used as a poison."
Reen shuddered and shook her head.
"It wasn't a poisoning. It was an overdose."
Mander blinked. He could not imagine Toro using a dangerous drug. But before he could say anything, Reen continued.
The rage is a symptom of long-term use, as is the darkening of the blood vessels. The last few hollows I've received from Toro, he was angry, upset. He blamed the Jedi for sending him out to the middle of nowhere. He felt he was getting a runaround from his contacts. He sounded bitter, frustrated. It wasn't like him. I didn't think about it at the time, but ran into a mutual friend on Kairin, another Pantoran. The friend said that Toro looked sick and had gotten angry when asked about it.
Sick,
Mander said. A statement, not a question. Reen looked away from Mander.
He said that Toro's veins were showing dark through his flesh.
You think he was already addicted?
Said Mander. He felt the air go out of him. It was one thing for young Toro to give in to a momentary flash of anger. It was another if he had been using a drug all this time, without anyone knowing.
No,
He corrected himself, without Mander or the Jedi Council knowing about it. Toro's sister knew, or at least suspected.
I came here to confront him, to find out if he was okay.
She said, making a gesture of frustration.
We were not close. I left for space before he left to join your Jedi, but he was family and I was worried.
and you came here and found that he was dead.
Said Mander, hoping his voice covered what he felt inside.
And that another Jedi was here asking after him.
Said Reen.
I didn't know if you had been working with him or looking for him as well, or...
She let her voice trail off.
You didn't know if I was the one giving him the Tempest.
Said Mander flatly. Reen nodded, her mouth a thin line. Mander said,
Your brother was on Makam T at the behest of the Jedi Order. That is true. But his assignment had nothing to do with spice in any form.
He was supposed to meet someone in the restaurant.
Said the Pantoran.
Probably someone to do with his mission.
Said Mander.
Or perhaps his source for the drug.
Said Reen. Mander sighed.
Any evidence that would be at the warehouse is gone now. We can probably track down the Bomu clan, though. There aren't many Rodians on Makam Te.
The Bomu clan is strictly small time.
Said Reen.
They are scattered across a dozen worlds like this. They hire out to just about anyone. They would be middle beings at best.
Mander suggested.
Still, they're our best hope for finding out where this drug, this Tempest, is coming from.
Reen thought for a moment.
It is a pretty large clan and provides muscle throughout the quadrant. Their scams vary from planet to planet, and sometimes different parts of the clan work for rival crime lords. The one thing that pulls them all together is vengeance. Take out one of them, and you can have the entire clan on your back in no time.
I will remember to add them to the list of the Jedi's enemies,
said Mander wryly. The conversation stopped as the waiter, a lumbering Swokes, came with their meals. The waiter also set 3 small iron cups on the table, bubbling with what Mander hoped was an infusion of Ancionian tea, or at least the Makam tea equivalent. Once the waiter left, Mander noticed that the bag containing the Tempest crystals was missing. He looked up sharply at Reen, who was staring into her cup as if the future lay there. Then he looked at the Bothan, who returned his glance with a gangly grin and reached into his vest, producing the envelope, which he handed back to Mander. Mander put the envelope back into his own robe pocket.
Yes, we shouldn't leave things like this out to be found. And thank you for your help in rescuing both of us earlier.
The Bothan raised both hands in an expression of,
What else could I have done?
Reen looked up and said,
Sorry, I didn't make introductions. Eddey Beret here is one of the best mechanics in this part of space. He can hotwire just about everything, from a speeder to a battlecruiser.
Or a manual load lifter.
added Mander.
Does he speak?
Only when I have to.
Replied the Bothan in a deep voice with an educated core accent. Despite himself, Mander blinked in surprise. It was not the voice he expected to come out of the furry muzzle of a Bothan.
Eddey believes that when you don't say much, people forget about you and they let things slip,
said Reen.
Once he comes to trust you, he's positively chatty.
Again, the Bothan retreated into mime, raising both hands in a comical shrug, and dug into a crate steak. Mander nodded. The intelligence-gathering abilities of the Bothan people were legendary. He turned back to Reen.
What can you tell me about the Tempest drug itself?
Not a lot,
said Reen.
It showed up less than a year ago, and suddenly it's all over the place. At first it was like any other type of spice, used for medicinal and, recreational purposes.
Mander nodded for her to continue.
Tempest is one of the really bad ones,
said Reen, lowering her voice now and leaning forward.
It's extremely addictive, and long-term users are clearly marked. Like a lot of spice, it makes the user feel good, but at a price.
She paused a moment, then added,
I need to ask. The Jedi in your studies, do you use,
The question surprised Mander Zuma. He pursed his lips and said,
No.
Another silence stretched out between them, and he added,
Some types of spice provide boosts in telepathy or empathy, but always at a cost of control. No Jedi would seriously use spice when dealing with the Force.
Another silence, and even Eddey had stopped eating. Reen's eyes were unfocused, and her mind was wrapped up in a now distant memory. The Jedi could imagine what she was thinking about. Mander added,
I am very sorry about your brother.
Even before I came here,
she said.
I knew I had lost him. I had lost him to his dreams, I had lost him to the Jedi, and I had lost him to the spice.
Toro's mission to Mak-Em-Tay had nothing to do with spice,
Mander repeated.
He was here to negotiate for a set of space coordinates. I don't know how or why he became involved in Tempest. Regardless, I am sorry.
She looked into the Jedi's unwavering eyes.
I believe you,
said Reen after a moment, and went back to picking at her steak. Then she looked up.
I'm sorry for shooting at you.
You would not be the first,
Mander said. The three ate in silence. After a few moments, Reen said,
Where does that leave us?
Mander suppressed a shrug.
I don't know if it leaves us anywhere. The spice that he used has been destroyed, along with its local distributors. I want to find out where the spice came from, but I also must finish Toro's mission, and I don't know if one is tied to the other. But someone else may want those coordinates, and someone definitely knew about Toro's addiction and deliberately spiked the wine with an overdose. That means I have competition for what I need and must act quickly.
Reen did not look up from her meal. Then, as if realizing something for the first time, she said,
You said he was looking for space coordinates. Doesn't seem like much of a mission for a Jedi.
They are for the Indrexu spiral,
said Mander in a low voice. Both Reen and Eddey looked up, and Reen let out a low whistle.
The Indrexu spiral? That's a knotty bit of space. It's a swirling maelstrom of protostars and dark matter just looking for ships to blow up. Even spacers who make the Kessel Run know better than to try it. Who would have been foolhardy enough to have mapped it?
That I do not know,
said Mander.
But I do know who has the coordinates, and that Toro was supposed to meet with them in orbit above Mak-Em-Tay.
Reen looked at him thoughtfully.
Once you get the coordinates, you'll need someone who knows the space lanes to confirm them.
I know my galactic navigation,
said Mander.
I've studied the relevant texts on my way here.
Meaning you've never programmed a navicomp, have you?
Reen's eyes lit up.
Probably had some droid do it. It's an art form, you know. You mess up the numbers and, well, it's not pretty, that's all.
Are you volunteering to help?
Asked Mander, and the Bothan made a coughing noise like the steak was going down a breathing tube.
Not volunteering,
said Reen, ignoring her companion.
If Toro was killed for Jedi business, then it makes it my business as well. If someone overdosed or poisoned him to keep him from these coordinates, I'd like to meet them.
And if they decide to come after me, you'd like to be there,
said Mander. Reen gave a shrug and stabbed at the last of her steak.
You're my best lead,
she said.
Do you have a ship?
Asked the Jedi. Reen hesitated with the large forkful of steak and set it down on the iron plate. The Bothan was grinning, but said nothing.
Well,
said the Pantoran, suddenly more circumspect.
Yes and no.
How much yes and how much no?
Asked Mander. Reen said,
There is a ship, the Ambition. But it's not what you would call functional.
The Bothan was making a chuffing noise that Mander could swear was chuckling. It was Mander's turn to raise his eyebrows.
How non-functional is it?
Extremely non-functional,
said the Bothan, and there was clear amusement in his voice.
It is in a couple of pieces,
started Reen.
More than a dozen major ones,
added Eddey.
Not counting the...
A few pieces,
corrected Reen, staring daggers at the Bothan.
Just a few pieces. Back on a landing pad on Kieran. If,
she added quickly, cutting off Eddey Beret.
They haven't sold it off for scrap to pay for the birthing fee.
The Bothan merely smiled and folded his furred hands in front of himself.
Ah,
said Mander.
So you are stranded here. But someone with the coordinates for the Indrexu spiral.
And the ability to check them out.
Reen put in.
Would be able to write their own ticket.
Finished Mander.
Sounds fair enough. Yes, I think an experienced pilot would be helpful. If I get the coordinates and they check out, you can have them as well. The Jedi don't have much in the way of material belongings, so consider it Toro's bequest.
He's giving in too easily,
said the Bothan.
There has to be a catch.
There is,
said Mander.
The catch is the people who have the coordinates, the ones who kept Toro jumping through hoops for weeks.
So my brother was negotiating with tough customers,
said Reen.
How bad can they be?
Mander said.
Toro was negotiating with the Hutts.
Now it was the previously calm Bothan's turn to react, his eyes wide and his fur raised from the crown of his head back along his spine.
You can't be serious,
he managed.
Completely,
said Mander.
I know that the Bothans and the Hutts have bad blood between them, so if you want to back out at this point, I would understand.
Eddey opened his mouth to reply, but Reen beat him to the punch.
Bad blood is not the problem. Bothans and Hutts are natural competitors. The problem is that you can't trust any Hutts. Period.
I believe the one we are dealing with can be trusted,
Mander said. Reen stifled a laugh and said,
The only people who tolerate the Hutts are those who have to work for them. And even then they work very hard to keep them at an arm's length. Every single Hutt is a criminal and a thief. Their entire civilization is built upon the powerful stealing from the weak. They survived the destruction of their original homeworld, Val, and proceeded to steal another one from a less powerful species. Now Nal Hutta is a haven for the crime lords, and its moon, Nar Shaddaa, is rife with corruption.
Granted,
said Mander.
But the Old Republic dealt with the Hutts when they had to, and in this case, the benefits were considered worth it. And if all Hutts are untrustworthy, that means you can depend on what they will do.
They are predictable,
said Eddey Beret.
That's a far cry from dependable.
You're making a mistake dealing with them in the first place,
said Reen.
If you want my professional opinion.
And in your long experience,
said Mander,
you've never dealt with Hutts.
That's the point,
countered Reen.
I have. And it is a job best done through middle beings and fixers with strong stomachs and weak morals. It is not a question of if a Hutt will betray you, but when.
So you're saying no, then?
Mander asked with a sigh. Eddey made to say something, but Reen overrode him again.
I'm saying that you had best be careful. They're not like most of the other sentients you encounter out here on the Rim. Their brains don't even work the same way as everyone else's.
She said.
And they're resistant to your Jedi mind tricks.
I have reliable information to that effect,
said Mander.
I believe that it is one reason they are willing to deal with the Order. They feel we are at a disadvantage in negotiations, both with our limited ability to affect them and our tendency to deal with people fairly.
In other words, you are predictable,
muttered Eddey. Reen ignored him.
They will stab you in the back at the first hint of a profit. And Hutts deal in spice,
she said firmly.
They do,
said Mander.
So the question is, do these Hutts deal in that type of spice?
Reen bit her lip, and the Bothan watched her as the wheels turned. At length, she said,
Do you think that this is responsible for my brother's death?
Mander shook his head.
You said that, not me. I don't have enough information one way or another. A rival group may be after the coordinates, and they may be the ones that gave your brother the overdose. Or it may be for some other matter he was investigating. Toro's reports were brief, so it could be that he became involved in investigating this Tempest himself. In any event, I can use someone who understands the possible perils, and you seem to meet that requirement. Are you still interested?
Reen looked at Eddey, and if the Bothan communicated anything to the Pantoran, it eluded Mander's senses. But after a moment, she nodded.
We're in. Tell us about this trustworthy Hutt that you poor naive Jedi have been dealing with.
These Hutts belong to the Huttesé clan. Have you heard of them?
Both of them looked at him blankly.
They are not one of the ruling clans, but are on the next level down, socially. The patriarch is Popara Huttesé, and he is the one who has the navigation codes.
Any idea where he got these codes in the first place?
Said Reen.
No,
said Mander.
Although it's not hard to speculate. The Huttesés are a trading clan, and apparently spend a great deal of effort in discovering new items and markets. The idea that someone in his employ discovered,
or stole,
or otherwise acquired the codes is not beyond reason.
Popara and the Huttesés have a good reputation.
Continued Mander, adding quickly.
Good, obviously being relative when dealing with Hutts. He is ancient in Hutt terms and has built a reputation for straightforward trade. From all our reports, he is sharp but honest in his dealings, and always gets what he wants. He pays his people well, and has a surprising amount of loyalty.
Luxury,
said Eddey Beret, and the other two looked at him. The Bothan finished the last of his meal and said,
Hutts would see loyalty and are treating one's workers well as a luxury, as much a status symbol as a humanoid dance slave or a storied piece of hollow art. If this trustworthy Hutt cannot own entire planets, the ability to engage in such extravagant actions would be a conspicuous display of power.
Mander nodded.
I had not considered that as a possibility.
Reen put in,
Keep this in mind. The Hutts have no words in their language for thank you. The best they can manage is, Bargon unoa a uyache taguma. Your services will be rewarded.
I know enough Hutt-ties to get by,
said Mander.
Even taught a bit to your brother. That is one of the reasons why he was chosen for this particular mission.
Despite himself, Mander frowned at the reminder of sending Toro off. He pressed on.
Regardless, Popara Huttesé has a good reputation, and I think we can trust him.
Reen looked at Mander a long moment, her head tilted. At last she said,
What kind of Jedi are you?
Mander blinked for a moment, confused by the question.
What do you mean?
Reen's eyes narrowed.
You didn't know about the Tempest. And you're negotiating for a set of space coordinates with a Hutt. A Hutt that you're willing to trust.
Your brother was willing to trust this Hutt,
said Mander calmly, his face a mask now, belying his irritation.
And look where that got him,
she retorted. Then she realized what she had said. A shocked look crossed her face, and she turned away. Mander was unsure what to say. He looked at Eddey, and the Bothan nodded at him to continue.
A Jedi goes where he is needed,
said Mander.
Your brother, regardless of his fate, knew this. I taught him that, as I myself was taught. I will finish Toro's task, and if I can, bring those responsible for his death to justice. I would appreciate your help.
He looked at the Bothan.
Both of you.
Reen looked up and pushed the night blue hair back across her forehead.
You'll need our help if you're going to survive out here in the real world. You have to drive a hard bargain with the Hutts. Anyone who would trust a Hutt needs someone to keep them from walking into walls or falling down a well. It might as well be us.
The Bothan nodded, and Mander said,
Very well then. Welcome aboard.
Reen leaned forward on the table and templed her fingers together. She said,
So when do we meet this good Hutt of yours?
First thing tomorrow,
said Mander.
Popara's yacht should pull into orbit this evening. I am supposed to meet his factorum at the starport at dawn. Berth Y27. Meet me there, and you'll get a chance to draw your own conclusions.